The episode opens with the sound of heavy rain pounding against the pavement, wind howling through narrow alleys. The distant hum of the city pulses in the background. A slow, eerie melody builds underneath, dark and foreboding. The city felt different tonight. The storm had returned, washing the streets in darkness, casting shadows that twisted and turned with every gust of wind. For Detective Ethan Graves, the chase was almost over. Mr. H. Victor Hall had eluded him for too long, but now the game was nearing its end, and Graves was ready to make his final move. The sound of a car engine revving faintly in the distance. Graves' footsteps echo as he walks down a wet, deserted street. The streets of the city, night. The rain continues to fall, harder now, splashing against the pavement. Graves' footsteps are steady, purposeful as he walks down a narrow street, his coat flapping in the wind. Graves had spent the entire night tracking Hale's network, following the leads, tracing the money, uncovering every connection. It had taken him deeper into the shadows than he had ever gone before, but now he had what he needed. He knew where Holly would be, and this time there would be no more running. Graves pauses, the sound of his footsteps stopping as he looks up at an old, imposing building, the location of Hale's final stronghold. The building loomed before him, a decaying relic of the city's past. It had once been a place of power, but now it stood abandoned, crumbling into ruin. Inside, Holly was waiting. Graves could feel it. This was where it would all end. Graves takes a deep breath, steeling himself for what's to come. His footsteps resume as he approaches the entrance. Inside Hale's stronghold, night. The door creaks open, and Graves steps inside. The air is thick with the smell of damp and decay. Water drips steadily from the ceiling, and the wind whistles through broken windows. Graves' footsteps echo as he moves deeper into the building. The inside of the building was dark, empty, save for the echo of his own footsteps. But Graves knew better than to trust the silence. He could feel eyes on him, watching from the shadows. Hale's men were here, hidden, waiting for their moment to strike. Graves' breathing is steady, controlled. The sound of a door creaks softly in the distance. Graves' senses sharpen, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun. Graves moved carefully through the darkened hallways, his gun drawn, his senses on high alert. He knew that Holly would have planned for this. He had always been 2 steps ahead, orchestrating every move from the shadows. But tonight, the advantage belonged to Graves. Graves rounds a corner, and suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoes behind him, quick and light. He stops, turning sharply, gun raised. For a moment, everything was still. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged, one of Hale's men. His eyes were cold, his face hidden by shadows, but Graves didn't hesitate. A single gunshot echoed through the hall, and the man crumpled to the floor. The sound of a body hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Graves' breathing remains steady, his gun still raised as he steps over the fallen figure. Graves moved forward, deeper into the building, his resolve unshaken. He was close now, he could feel it. Halle was waiting for him, but Graves wasn't afraid. He had been preparing for this moment since the beginning. Hale's lair, the final confrontation. The atmosphere shifts as Graves enters a large, dimly lit room. The sound of dripping water fades slightly, replaced by a low, steady hum, almost mechanical. The room is dark, the only light coming from flickering fluorescent bulbs overhead. And then Graves found him. Victor Holly, Mr. H, stood in the center of the room, waiting. The man who had orchestrated everything. The man who had manipulated, murdered, and twisted the city to his will. But tonight, his game was over. Hale's voice is calm, steady, and dangerous. His presence commands the room, but there's an air of tension. Hale knows the end is near. "Detective Graves," Holly said, his voice smooth as ever. But there was something else in it this time, an edge of uncertainty. "You've come a long way. I must admit, I didn't think you'd make it this far." Graves steps forward, his gun trained on Halle, his voice steady but filled with determination. "It's over, Halle," Graves said, his voice hard as steel. "This time, you're not getting away." Halle chuckles softly, a cold, almost mocking sound. He doesn't move, his hands remaining at his sides. But Halle wasn't ready to surrender. "Not yet. You still don't understand, do you, Graves?" Halle said, his smile fading into something darker. "You think this is about me? This is bigger than you or me. The city is built on power, on control. And I am the one who controls it." Graves narrows his eyes, his grip on the gun tightening. The tension in the room thickens. Graves didn't flinch. "The game's over, Halle. You don't control anything anymore." Hale's smile returns, this time colder, more calculated. He steps forward slowly, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement. "You think you've won?" Halle asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You think taking me down will change anything? The city will always belong to men like me. I'm just the face of it. Take me down, and someone else will take my place." "Maybe," Graves said, "but not tonight. Tonight, it ends with you." Graves steps closer, his gun still raised. His voice is sharp, filled with resolve. The sound of the wind howling through the broken windows grows louder, almost drowning out the sound of Hale's next words. Hale's smile faltered for the first time. He could see it in Graves' eyes, the determination, the unwavering resolve. And for the first time, Halle realized that his time had run out. There's a long pause, the tension reaching its peak. The sound of a gunshot rings out loud and sharp echoing through the room. Then, silence. Aftermath, early morning. The rain has stopped. The sound of soft wind blowing through the city streets fills the air. The distant hum of police sirens wails softly in the background. Graves' footsteps echo as he walks away from the building, his breathing steady but heavy with exhaustion. The night had ended, but the echoes of the battle still lingered in the air. Victor Halle was gone. His empire had crumbled, and the game he had played for so long was finally over. But for Graves, the weight of it all was just beginning to settle in. Graves slows his pace, his footsteps softer now as he walks through the quiet streets of the city. The city felt different now, quieter. The power Halle had wielded for so long had been broken. But Graves knew that the shadows would always remain. There would always be another threat, another enemy lurking just beyond the light. Graves stops, taking a deep breath as he looks out over the city. The sound of the wind grows softer, the tension easing slightly. But tonight, at least, the shadows had been driven back. Graves had won. The city was safe. For now. The sound of footsteps approaching from behind. Charlie's voice is implied through the narrator. Charlie appeared at his side, his face tired but relieved. "You did it, detective," he said quietly. "It's over." Graves turns to look at him, the weight of everything heavy in his eyes. Graves nodded, but he knew the truth. It wasn't really over. Not completely. The city would never be truly free of men like Halle. But for tonight, it was enough. The sound of police sirens fades into the distance as the two men stand in silence, the wind blowing softly around them. The sound of typing fills the air again, rhythmic and deliberate. The atmosphere is quieter now, more subdued. A phone rings faintly in the background, but this time it goes unanswered. In a dark room, far from the chaos of the night, the game had finally ended. The pieces had been removed from the board, and the players had fallen, but the shadows never truly disappeared. Somewhere in the city, a new game was already beginning. The sound of typing stops abruptly, the soft wind continuing in the background. Graves had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The city was safe for now, but the shadows would return. And when they did, Graves would be ready. Next time, on Silent Shadows.